It's April 22nd, 2021. This is Roqe. He is an Iranian-American actor and comedian who has appeared in dozens of TV shows, and you might know him from Veep or Silicon Valley or Brooklyn Nine-Nine or his recurring role on the hit series Shameless. But recently, Payam Banifaz has been getting attention for his very funny online videos where he sends up Persian dads and the culture of the Persian family at home. Peter joins me for a feature interview about his current success and his journey from Iran to the UK to a Korean and Filipino community in LA where he found his voice and his home. A feature interview with Peter Banifaz coming up. Plus, it's all Persian to us and more. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. This is Roqe. Hi there, welcome to episode number 104 of Roqe. Welcome to those of you listening around the world in Toronto, in Toulouse, in Tehran, in Turin, in Toledo, Tabriz, Tulsa, Taipei, Tokyo, Tashkent, and Richmond Hill. Durud bar shoma. Khosh omadid. Hope you're all doing okay. Hope you are mizun. Hope you're ready for another edition of Roqe. We are on an ongoing mission to build a new audio-visual encyclopedia of Iranian diaspora identity. We're doing the show coming to you on Spotify, on SoundCloud, Instagram, YouTube, iTunes, CastBox, and Telegram. If you'd like to see some visuals with your Roqe diet, switch over to YouTube right now. And if you like your Roqe descriptions and bulletins in English and Persian, check us out on Telegram. Hello, the fabulous Kian.
Hello, Jian.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Peter Banifaz coming up. He happens to have been in a number of my favorite comedy shows in recent years. Like, I'm a huge fan of Veep, huge fan of Silicon Valley, love what he does in Shameless. But this Instagram channel.
Oh my God.
Did you see the dancing video that he's just put up?
Oh God, he's just
video
hilarious.
Of him doing these Persian dances.
Yes, he's just the best.
Very funny, and yet, of course, he does a send up of a Persian dad. So I guess loosely based on his dad. I'm gonna have to ask him about it.
Based on all our dads.
Based on all of our dads, which is very funny. But his story as well is quite a moving one. I mean, he's this comedic actor, but I've heard him talk about his life, and someone like me can really relate to what he went through coming to a new country, desperately trying to fit in when he first gets to the UK, then to the US. And a lot of what he's doing comedically is reflecting on the immigrant experience.
Yeah.
Really interesting guy. Looking forward to having Peter join us from LA in just a few moments. Hello, Captain Reza.
Hello, sir.
Hello, Groovy Shaya.
Hi.
Hi. Shaya, you're very you've got a spring in your step today. Do you know what that means?
Spring in my step.
Yes.
بهار آوردم با خودم.
Well, that's the literal translation, I guess. But I mean, a spring in your step means that you seem happy, excited. You, someone would say you got some action last night. For example, that would be a reason. But maybe you just had a lot of coffee, or you. I know yesterday was 420, or a couple of days ago.
All right.
These the lingering effects of. Yeah.
Actually, no. It has two reasons. First of all, is spring. The second one, actually, is that I'm reading a book, and it's about a girl who has cancer. And honestly, it has a real serious effect on me, and I'm grateful that I am healthy. And yeah.
Wow.
So I want to appreciate it.
Turn that around, Captain Reza.
Bet you feel bad. You made
what are
fun
you
of
reading?
Well, definitely not a book about a girl who's got cancer. I'd be depressed. Good for you, Shaya. You got a positive.
Which book is it?
The Fault in
Our Stars.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a film as well.
Right. It's a good film.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, very nice, Shaya. An inspirational message. I think we now probably have to end the show after that.
How can you
reflection
top
on Saraton, and cancer runs pretty deep in my family. Thanks. Now I'm thinking of all the people we've lost. And
Oh, sorry.
guy knows
No,
how to
but
put
the
it
main
on.
reason is spring, actually.
He turns it
thank you.
around.
Very, very believable. Hey, speaking of the spring in our step in the coming days on Rook, Bahman Gobadi joins us on Monday, the great Iranian film director, Kurdish Iranian film director. This interview will be in Persian. I will be conducting this interview in Persian.
I can't wait for that. It's gonna be
With English subtitles, if you're tuning in and you don't speak Farsi. So that's coming up on Monday. Dr. Angie Sadiqi will be joining us in the coming days on Rook on her wisdom and plant-based diets. And, of course, speaking of food, Piyaz Miyaz will also be joining us in the coming days. He, the sensational young chef from Vancouver, who was sort of the entrepreneur guy and now has, based on his lifetime love of cuisine and his interest in cooking, has created this brand called Piyaz Miyaz.
Speaking of cooking and eating, how's your intermittent fasting
That
going?
my intermittent fasting, actually inspired by Piyaz Miyaz, because he does. I'm still doing it. I'm still doing it. But no, listen, here's the headline. First of all, the app. I'm still stuck with this. So I just to catch people up, if you weren't listening on Monday, I started this intermittent fasting project, diet. I don't even know what you call it, but it's the idea that you eat as much as you want with impunity for 8 hours, and then you take 16 hours of fasting, much like Ramadan, but on a different schedule. Right? So I stop eating around 8:30 at night and start again the next day around 12:30. Now, so then I signed up for this app, which, as I was explaining on Monday, is just way too enthusiastic. And by the way, I have tried. I haven't deleted it yet, but I have tried everything to get this thing to shut up, to stop being so excited. First of all, it's worse than Clubhouse. Every 10 minutes or so, it's telling, it pops up on my phone, you're still fasting. How's it going? You're not a cactus. You need water. Like it keeps, but the voice I hear is like Billy Crystal and Sarah. It's like, how are you? Like a campy actor, you can't eat, so it's constantly, but anyway, I'm dealing with that. That's an emotional impact of, this relationship. I'm spending more time with this app, communicating with this app than anybody in my life. This is like become my companion. Oogie is jealous of the amount of time I'm spending with this app, talking to me, and I say, thank you. Yes, I appreciate it. But there's another thing too, which is that I don't even know how to delicately say this. See, I hadn't thought about what happens is, in lieu of not eating, in lieu of eating, you are required to drink water. Drinking water everybody says is the thing to do. And I'm looking at you. I don't know why I'm looking at you, because
my companion is
you basically bring in a bathtub every day to the studio and then drink from it. But here's the thing: my body is not used to drinking this much water. And so I don't have a plan for the evacuation of the water. Is Jish a bad word? We can say Jish,
No,
right?
it's good.
It is a constant. I feel like a 90-year-old man. Like I am like, it's just at this point I drink and then I have to run to the bathroom.
Welcome to my world.
Well, what's the plan with this?
just
Like
keep
this is it's horrible. It's a disaster. I don't know. Yesterday I'll tell you, Shaya was here. We'd pre-taped an interview with a very wonderful gentleman named Barmak Taliqani. He works for NASA. He's an important project manager. He's building a lunar crane for NASA.
Oh my God.
And we're just starting the interview. And like this guy's, he's on borrowed time. We're borrowing him from NASA for him to come on Rook. And I say, Barmak John, I'm sorry, I have to stop the interview. And he's like, what's happening? Is there something technically wrong? He's a NASA guy, right? Is the spaceship working? I'm like, I have to go and Jeesh.
Did you actually say that to him?
Well, I did. I said, excuse me for a minute. I'll be back.
Pardon me.
Then I came back and I saw that he was confused. And I said, well, I just started this intermittent fasting. And now I have to go to the bathroom all the time. And he was really, to be honest, not impressed. Like he was like, well, okay then. So I don't know. What do you do?
I exactly what you said. I go to the bathroom often.
Like while I was
But that's
talking to this
healthy.
guy yesterday, because he's NASA, I was thinking about astronauts and how they must have like a pouch or something that they don't have to go.
Did you ask him? You should have.
No, I mean, but I don't. This is not doable. I can't. I'm hoping my system gets so it never gets better. Because I'm hoping my system gets used to
it.
this, so I
Yeah.
don't have to keep going to the
Yeah,
bathroom.
it does adjust a little bit. Just a little bit.
Anyway,
Great.
sorry everybody, but Kiana asked, so there's your answer. That's how the intermittent
It's
diet is
all
going,
their
or
fault.
intermittent fasting.
I didn't ask about his G schedule.
I'm like, it's like me and Oogie. You know, I G's more than my dog now. You know, we go together.
So he takes you out
G
now.
My apologies to those of you who've tuned in, expecting an erudite conversation about Persian culture. My apologies to Peter Banifaz, who's wondering if he should come on the show. By the way, speaking of erudite conversations, I'm thrilled with this very popular episode now. After a couple of days, there's thousands of streams of our Monday show with Richard Foltz. Dr. Richard Foltz. It was titled Iranians Before the Time of Islam. So Richard joined us. He's an author, a professor who specializes in ancient Iranian history and the history of Iranian civilization. We had a really interesting conversation, I think. I mean, he was fascinating about who Iranians were, what Iran was, how much what are the threads of continuity from that period, pre-1400 years ago, going back 2,500 years ago to today for us as Persians. And because of that conversation and all the side discussions that it fostered, that it led to, we've decided that tomorrow on Clubhouse we'll take up this idea, this question, and the topic for tomorrow is, can we really take credit for ancient Persian history? This is the part where it intersects with something we often talk about on Roqe, which is that the defense, the reflexive defense for a lot of Iranians when you say something negative about contemporary Iranian history or contemporary Iranian actions is to say, yeah, but, you know, we invented the gramophone or whatever the frick, you know, that we did this 2,500 years ago. We were a great civilization, etc. And indeed, Richard Foltz talked about Western civilization being predicated upon Persian civilization, but as a mirror of it. But can we take credit for that 2,000 years later, just because we are Iranian in our DNA? So we'll do that tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time on Clubhouse. If you're not with us on Clubhouse already, find the app on your iPhone. If you do have an iPhone, if you don't, sorry about that for now. It seems like it's only on Apple products, but join us on Clubhouse and go to the Roqe Media Club. Join in the Roqe Media Club, or you can just follow me and I'll let you know. 4 p.m. tomorrow is when we're doing that. You'll be there, right, Keon?
Yes, of course. Reza, will you be there?
Of course.
Of course, Reza.
Of course.
Okay. We'll
Yep,
take you at your
100%.
word.
Yeah, I was there last time.
You were there. You were there for the first time. Yeah. Speaking of ancient Persian history, we have a new edition of It's All Persian to Us coming up. Yes.
Yeah.
And any hints on what we're dealing
this
with?
This one is like medical. It's related in the medical field.
Oh.
It's like one of the greatest contributions by a Persian.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. Thank you. We look forward to that. We'll kind of come right back with It's All Persian to Us with the fabulous Keon, Captain Reza, and Groovy Shaya. Let's get to our featured guest today. So my guest today is an actor, a comedian, an improviser, who's perhaps best known for his recurring role as Farhad in the hit dramatic comedy series Shameless. He's also the man behind an Instagram channel with some very funny short videos about growing up Iranian in the United States, and in particular, dealing with a Persian dad. The boon and the burden of a Persian dad. Take a listen to this.
I want to be a basketball player when I grow up. چی؟ Basketball? نه خیلی امکان نداره. نه خوب میپریم، نه خوب میدیم. Okay? Dad, Santa Claus brought me a new PlayStation for Christmas. نه بابا سانتا کلاس کیه دیگه؟ من خودم رفتم تارگت تو صف وایسادم. خاک تو سر این سانتا کلاس. Dad, I want to be a singer when I grow up. چی؟ سینگر؟ با کدوم صدا؟ امکان نداره عزیزم. تو که صدات مثل آژیر پلیسه. Dad, my goldfish Sammy died. خب آفرین کشتیش دیگه. بهت نگفتم بهش غذا نده اینقدر. Dad, I want to be an actor when I grow up. چی؟ actor؟ نه خیر عزیزم. امکان نداره. هم زیادی قدرت کوتاست، هم یه دماغ داری مثل آقا. اوکی تو فقط درس بخون.
The very funny stylings of Peter Payam Banifaz doing an impression of the son and the father in a Persian diaspora household. Peter is an Iranian-American actor and comedian who was born in Tehran shortly after the 1979 revolution. In the mid-80s, his family immigrated first to the UK, then to the US, where he would end up growing up in the greater Los Angeles area and getting an MBA he says he never uses from California Lutheran University. Peter made his focus being a performer and has studied under legendary improvisers and appeared in a long list of films and TV shows. He got his first on-screen role in 2005 when he was cast as Drake Zuba in the dramatic short film Delusive Dreams. He has since then appeared in TV shows such as Veep, Perry Mason, Silicon Valley, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Lethal Weapon, not to mention his recurring role on the hit series Shameless. During the pandemic, Peter has transformed his Instagram page into a portal of funny stories and observations about growing up Persian, and particularly about Iranian dads. For that, he has gained a big following, and right now, Peter Banifaz joins me from Los Angeles today. Hello, sir.
Hello. Hello, my friend. Thank you so much for having me.
Very nice to have you on the program. You have become every Persian parent's dream, a comedic actor.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm what every Persian parent wants for their child.
A guy making videos on TikTok and Instagram.
Guy, yeah. In a very difficult business that's extremely cyclical. It's thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure. And thank you for wonderful introduction.
It's a pleasure. And I should not actually, through my joke there, minimize what you've done as an actor, because you, frankly, having a lot of friends who are actors, you're one of the most prolific I know in terms of all that you've done in the last decade or 15 years or so. Let me start with that very funny clip, though, that we just heard in the intro, Peter. Your Instagram page has... it's been on fire with these videos you make. There are, I guess, fringe benefits of how a pandemic has actually fueled some careers. So the story is that you were unable to do a lot of gigs, naturally, because of COVID. So you figured, why not make some fun videos?
I mean, yeah, the entire industry, the entertainment industry, just came to a screeching halt here in the U.S. In Los Angeles, one of the biggest industries here is the film industry, and it just came to a complete halt. There was no production, there was no auditions. I'm sitting home really just anxious about the pandemic, like alone, because I'm not seeing anybody. And then so I just kind of started doing videos only to distract myself from all this and just sort of have some kind of creative outlet. I had no intention of really I don't know, like it becoming a thing. It's just sort of, I was just doing it to alleviate my own anxiety at the time.
This idea of the two characters where you edit one going to the next and having this dialogue. The woman who was sending up Trump, that very funny comedian, that woman, I feel like she was at the forefront of that. It seems like a pretty new idea, but something that's really been a big one. Where did the idea of poking fun at the stereotypical Persian dad using a son-dad combination come from?
I guess I had done sort of the forward camera facing sort of videos with the dad where the dad's just sort of talking at the camera or right off camera. I got to a point where I felt like it would be easier if the dad was directly interacting with someone. And I sort of thought about my own upbringing when it was like sort of I would be speaking to my dad pretty much in English and he would kind of respond in Farsi. And I just thought that was fun to try. And it felt like it was easy enough if I just kind of edited it right. Also, I had no choice because I wasn't really like we weren't allowed to see anybody. Right, so I couldn't have another actor there. So it's like I kind of had to play. Was
the dad a character that you've had before this? I mean,
No.
It's just a new thing. My favorite part is that they basically, the son and the dad, like it's just you, like you look exactly the same. The dad just wears a shawl, or like a cardigan, but it works. Like we see the dad and we see the son, but there's like really, you don't try and look like an older guy and a younger guy or anything,
I think when you're doing like a little 40-second, 50-second clip, I think, like, to me, it almost gets a little distracting if the person went out of their way to sort of like too much of like makeup or like, you know, like, or too much, you know, like masks or wigs or stuff. I just feel like it's a little distracting.
Right.
And I feel like if it's funny and interesting and if there's some type of realism to it, the audience will forego the fact that you're clearly not an older person. You know, I think they'll just sort of buy into that.
Right.
And I think that only happens sort of with this type of platform, like videos on Instagram and TikTok and social media, because it's so fast. The audience is willing to go there with you because they know they don't have to stretch their imagination too far. As opposed to a film, you know, if I was to play my dad in a film, halfway through it, it's kind of like the audience, all right, we're kind of over this.
Right.
I'm done having to use my imagination. So that's kind of the way I felt about that.
You're so right. I've never thought about that until this moment, which is that if you're throwing up a 30-second video and a fast cut one back and forth, I'm going to spend the first 15, 20 seconds going, what's that white beard? Okay, who is he? What I'm going to, if you're in full makeup or if you're developing these characters and visually, it makes so much more sense to just depend on the comedy itself and the humor of the dialogue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing is, because they're so quick, my idea is I don't want the audience to have any questions, a single question off topic. Who's what, what's happening, what's the joke?
Right.
So a lot of times I kind of explain in the description too what it is that I'm going for. So once the audience has read that, then I feel like at that point, the audience for the most part shouldn't have any questions off top.
So you said the element of realism, and the comedy in it obviously is partly because, especially as Iranians, but even a non-Iranian would get that you're sending up something that has some truth to it. So the dad in your videos tends to never quite be pleased with what the son is up to. Is that the way we see Iranian parents?
I mean, that's the way I certainly see Iranian parents. You know, I mean, I think it. Obviously, again, in the videos, it's I'm exaggerating for the sake of just, you know, for comedic purposes, but I do think that Iranian parents have a very high expectation out of their children, and it's kind of just a part of our culture.
Right.
I can only imagine what the expectation was on my parents and what the expectation was on my parents' parents, you know, from their folks. Like, I feel like these are sort of tangible assets to our culture as long as they help. And once they hurt, they're no longer of use to us. And I would love to see our culture evolve away from at least the extremities of it. Like, I think it's important to hold up your children to a high standard for themselves, but to put a level of pressure on them where it produces anxiety and feelings of not being good enough, that can't help anybody. Yeah, but I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. The nothing's ever good enough can certainly be unhelpful,
right?
from Persian parents. But and I speak from experience, understanding the dad in your videos. I mean, I know that we're going to get into your story and how you evolved into the work that you do, and I know that your parents have long come to terms with, or even are very supportive of your career now. But still, when you start making these videos, for example, this year, what did your dad first say when he saw these videos?
You know, I've really gone through the journey with my dad, with my career. So, like, he's got to a point where, like, he doesn't question what I'm doing. He understands that, like, he's finally got to a point where he knows what I'm doing because I put in the work. Our families are all very results oriented. They want to see the results of it. Right. The results is money, and the results is sort of movement in the career. So he saw both, and he was like, okay, now I get it.
Once you got that State Farm commercial, he knew.
I mean,
you had that for 2 years, right? I mean,
certainly helped.
Yeah.
That certainly helped. Again, once he saw the money coming, and then he's like, once I'm pay my mortgage, and like once I'm just living my life and I'm investing and doing all that, then he's like, okay, now it makes sense. Again, sort of the example of results oriented. But he loved the videos. He never took them personally. He always laughed it off. Him and I, growing up, we had an awkward relationship because of some of the very things that I do in my video, what are happening in my videos. But luckily now,
just we've come to a certain place in our relationship of understanding. I'm empathetic towards how he was raised and what that caused him to be like, and then he's more understanding and flexible about sort of, you know, who I am and how I live my life. And now we have a wonderful relationship. So
there's no element of Hamsaya Hachimigan. What are the neighbors going to think when they see your impression of a father? They're going to think it's me, and that's all done with. He's past that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
And by the way, I should just mention for the audience that I didn't just pull out the State Farm out of anywhere. There's a story where you did this State Farm commercial that was supposed to air for like 13 weeks or something. It ends up airing for 2 years, and you get you get a check for that each month, and so you end up showing one of those checks to your dad, who's been going, "Why are you doing this business?" and kind of goes, "Oh, okay, I get I get it now."
Yeah, I think my dad was kind of shocked of the potential.
Right.
You know, and you know, he's been in finance his whole life. So like numbers, so it was, luckily it was something substantial enough where he was like, "Oh, wait a fucking minute. This is something." You know, the thing is, I think he felt like I had talent, but he didn't know, I think he had no way of putting it into context, knowing what's enough to be successful, what's not enough to be successful. His big thing was like, why would somebody want to see like a little Iranian dude, you know, like, and it was, again, it was always,
he's not totally wrong. He's not totally wrong.
No, he's
right?
not.
Yeah.
I really appreciate how honest he was, because this business will tear your ass apart if you're not ready to hear it. And so I went into the business really just already humbled, you know, so I was able to never get too high and never get too low. So that helped me a lot.
There's another video where the kid wants to go out on a Friday night, and the Persian dad ends up asking like a shopping list of questions, some of which have very little relevance to the idea of whether the kid should go out or not. You posted this just last month, and it has tens of thousands of views on it. Does this come from personal experience?
You know, that one is one of those where it's like I took it from the culture more, and then sort of just like had my dad play that character that was sort of like this sort of comedic vehicle that's coming through. My parents were like that to an extent, but not as much as is presented in that video. But I have a lot of friends, you know, I especially have a friend this was kind of inspired by his dad, because he would literally ask a million questions. I think his logic was like, okay, you're about to leave. I probably won't see you till tomorrow because I'm going to go to sleep by the time you come home. So let me ask a few questions that I need answered for tomorrow. So he would be like, kind of like,
I need an answer for the next week. Yeah. Let me play this for people so they get an idea of it. This is Peter Banifaz. Take a listen.
I'm going out. کجا? To the movies. با کی? With my friend Steve. چند نفرین? 3 of us. اون کی اسمش چیه؟ Mike. خونش کجاست? Down the street. ننه باباش چی کارن؟ His mom's a real estate broker and his dad's a forensic accountant. از این بچه آشغالاست؟ I don't understand the context. کی رانندگی میکنه؟ Mike. ماشینی سیفی داره؟ It's a Mazda SUV. کی میرسی خونه؟ Like in 3 hours. مشروب نمیخوری که؟ No. سیگار نمیکشی که؟ No, it's not 1960. این marijuana نمیکشی که؟ No, and please stop calling it marijuana. به مامانت گفتی؟ Yes, and she asked me every single one of these same questions. اتاقتو تمیز کردی؟ No, that has nothing to do with anything. homeworkتو کردی؟ It's Friday night. اون تستت چی شد؟ That's next week. امروز ویتامین C خوردی؟ Yes. این دوشت هنوز آب میاد؟ That's a very irrelevant question, but yes. جاکت داری؟ In my car. پات هنوز درد میکنه؟ No, but I'm getting a really big headache from these questions. Okay, have fun.
That's Peter Payam Banifaz from his Instagram channel, playing both the Persian son and the father. Man, I love that one. I love that it ends with the dad saying, okay, have fun, after the third degree. And the question about are these bad guys that are, you know, is this that you're going to hang with? And you go, Dad, I don't understand the context. Or the son says, it's great writing, man. I really appreciate that.
Oh no, I appreciate it. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
So let's get into your story. You were born in Iran. I mean, you're a real child of the revolution. I guess, in other words, there was a revolution and your parents said, okay, let's have a kid. And you were named Payam somehow because of the revolution?
It's kind of like a two-part story. One is that apparently I was supposed to be born as a girl, and the doctors were sure of it. And I don't know how they were sure of it back then, but apparently they were sure of it. And my grandma, bless her soul, on my dad's side, she had a dream that my grandfather, who had already passed, I had never met, he passed before I was born, was holding a boy and told my grandma in that dream that it's going to be a boy, that it's going to be a boy. And she kept telling everyone it's going to be a boy. And my dad was like, Grandma, Mom, the doctors are saying it's going to be a girl. So when I was born a boy, she was like, see, I told you. Apparently there's a story. She went around to the whole hospital and gave everybody like coins or whatever, or like she was just so happy. So that sort of message from my grandpa, coupled with the fact that my family felt very hopeful after the revolution, and as it did a lot of Iranians, like they felt like, okay, there's going to be real change in Iran, because they were sick of having a king in place. They wanted a democracy. And that's what the Islamic Revolution promised, a democracy, a pure, democracy. And so I think that, coupled with, my grandma's dream, inspired them to be sort of creative and not that Payam is a very creative name, but I guess creative in reasoning for why they named me that.
It means message, basically, right?
It means message, right.
And yet your parents, like most other folks, soon find out that the promise of the revolution was not anything it was cracked up to be, and that they are living not in a democracy but in a brutal theocracy, now at war with Iraq. I'm going to ask you what it was like to be in the UK and the US after that, but do you have actually memories of, I know you were very small, but being a kid in Iran at that time?
I remember the war. That's the main thing I remember. And I remember the war very, very vividly. I was lucky I didn't have anybody in my family that went to war, because a lot of people died, unfortunately not. And I remember that I'd be sitting, let's say, in the living room playing with my toys, and suddenly whatever program you were listening to or whatever thing on TV you're watching would suddenly cut to red alert. And basically when that would happen is you would get away from the windows and you would try to go into the safest place. Now we were in an apartment complex, and it was known as Ekbatan in an area in Tehran. And we had a cellar, and everybody from the apartment complex would go in the cellar. And basically we would just wait till the bomb raids are over. And it's like, the way I would always describe bombs, the way bombs feel, is like, picture fireworks, but instead of just like the noise that moves you, it's the physical.
Wow.
There is a physical energy to these things where it's like you feel it in your body. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Literally, I remember the sound like it was yesterday. And at some point, these raids were happening. We were being forced to go and sort of like in the cellar for these raids, like 3-4 times a week. And then I think that was pretty much when my mom's like, right, we can't live like this. Like, we just can't live like this.
You were in Tehran, right?
We're in Tehran, yeah. So that was bearing the brunt of it because it was obviously the capital.
It's so interesting when an entire country, or two countries, Iran and Iraq, go through this for 8 years, and millions of people are involved in it, and over 1 million people die. It becomes this kind of understood part of our history where we go, well, yeah, there was a war and everyone lived through it, and you focus on the people who died, and tragically a lot of kids were sent to the front lines, who died, and were told that they were going to become martyrs or something, we don't focus a lot on the impact it would have on those who lived through it, especially like little kids. Like when I heard you talk about on another program at some point, you had talked about the implications of this when you end up moving to the UK in 1986. You're a kid, you're 4 or 5 years old, and it turns out you have pretty bad PTSD from the Iran-Iraq war. Can you talk about how that expressed itself?
My mom said that she noticed I was having, like I would be constantly having nightmares where I'd wake up screaming. She was like, this isn't normal. She said that I had such excessive separation anxiety from her that when she would go to the bathroom, I would sit behind the door and wait for her to come out. She just said you were just scared all the time. And so took me to, I'm luckily I had a mom that even at that time, mental health awareness, which for children wasn't a thing. Mental health awareness, and in our culture, unfortunately, it wasn't, in general, wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
It's getting a little better now, but
still a bit taboo. Still a bit taboo now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fortunately. But my mom luckily was open enough at that time. She said, okay, she took me to a child therapist. Child therapist, okay, he's dealing with PTSD from whatever he's seen, not just the experience of the war, but the experience of sort of escaping Iran, the experience of, because I had been separated now from my father, because my father came to the US first to sort of establish stuff while me and my mom and my brother were trying to come here through England after we left Iran. So I didn't end up seeing him for 2 years. So I think all that was causing these issues. Now the beautiful thing about being a kid is when those things, those stressors that were causing my issues were away from me, I was able to heal. I'm sure there are some issues, there were some residual problems that existed that probably still exist to this day. But I went from being a scared little boy to a very, very happy boy living in England. I was very happy. And a lot of that I think has to do with just being a child. And then luckily we moved in with my aunt there, who was already established there. She had lived there for decades. And I was able to go into sort of a life of normalcy. I wasn't afraid of bombs. I wasn't afraid of everything. I was in England. I mean, the first day I got there, my uncle took me to a store called Hamley's, which is like a 5-story toy store. And he says that I was walking down the aisles, like just crying, looking at all these toys. I'd never even seen a toy store before in my life. They didn't really have toy stores like that. And so going in that environment, it really helped me to heal those fears, Yeah.
By the way, when your dad goes to the States first and you don't see him for a couple of years, right? How did that affect you? I have an interesting similar story where my dad, I was growing up in England, and the decision was made by the 70s, like this was before the revolution for me. I was a little kid, and my parents had thought that they were going to go back to Iran, and then it's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go to Canada, for a better sort of life, sort of thing. And my dad came to Canada for about a year before we moved. And people forget that at that time, well, up until 10, 15 years ago, there's no Zoom or FaceTime or anything like that. I mean, so I would talk to my dad maybe once a week on the phone, but I would never see him. And I remember being so scared. I don't know where I got this from. I wrote about this once in a book about being so scared that when I would arrive in Canada, my dad would be really different. And for me, that was, he would have this big beard. I don't know why I assigned the beard to mean that he was evil or something, but it was so, I don't know, heartwarming or sort of comforting when I finally saw him, and it was just my dad, and because I had just built up this big fear of who he was going to be, in this new place. Did you go through any of that?
It was very awkward when I first came here and saw my dad again. Even though it was my dad, not seeing him in 2 years, 2 years to a kid is a long time. Yeah. Since kids are so in the moment, time takes much longer. I felt detached from him in a certain way. I was so happy to see him, but I felt detached from him in a strange way. I wasn't happy when I first came here. When I first came here, I was very anxious. That transition was very strange for me.
Well, you also you're also like suddenly you're in California. You're 6 years old, and you're an Iranian kid with a Cockney English accent, right?
Right.
So you're dealing with a lot.
My family when we came here, we had to start literally from the ground up again. So my family had nothing. And we lived in, at the time, it was a very poor area, and right now it's significantly more gentrified, and it's different now. But at the time, we lived in this just old small apartment complex. I remember the first time I walked into our new apartment, I was like, what the hell? Because we lived very differently in Iran. Mm-hmm. And I lived also differently in England.
So moving to the U.S. felt like a downgrade for you as a kid who doesn't have the context for it, right?
Absolutely. Uh-huh. Without the context, without understanding why it was the way it was, that we had to sacrifice things, sacrifice a certain way of life in order to get here and to be able to make it here. I didn't really understand that.
And you probably thought America was going to be the land of plenty, and you're going to have some glamorous, pool or something, right?
I always feel stupid saying this, but I honestly, in my kid brain, thought that the streets were paved with gold. So I had heard something like that before, and I thought there is so much money in this country. Everybody's rich. There's no poor people. Everyone's like a celebrity. And I went there, and we lived on the north side of Canoga Park off Saticoy, and I was like, wait a minute, this is nothing like, again, these days that area is very different. But at this time, I was heartbroken because of that. It felt like an unfulfilled promise.
Yeah. and it's a funny, how long did it take you to lose your accent?
I think honestly, like a year or something. I mean, again, it's like when you're a kid, it's just so much easier. Transition is easier. I mean, it's hard at first, but to get to that, to get to the place you need to is easier. And I was lucky because I was raised in a neighborhood where we were a neighborhood of immigrants. It was me and majority Mexican, El Salvadorian, and a Filipino. We were all living the same kind of life.
Yeah. But I get that. By the way, I mean, you had a good experience in England. I didn't have a bad one. But when we first moved to Toronto, we also moved to a kind of an area that was very, very full of first-generation immigrants. And my friends were like a black kid and a Pakistani kid. And it just felt so emancipating to me. I felt like, I found my community. Then we moved to this suburb, this very white conservative suburb, and I experienced all the things about being an ethnic kid there. But I totally get that. But it's a funny thing about wanting to lose your accent as a kid, because I also did everything I could to lose my English accent. And I was 8 years old. You were 6. Little did I know how cool it would be to have an English accent. I mean, if you had a Cockney accent now, that would be part of you'd be like the Omi Jalili. That'd be part of your gig, It'd be sort of like, it's the Cockney guy, But as a kid, you just want to lose it. I remember being in an elevator and some lady talking to me and my sister, and me answering, and her saying, "Oh, I love your little British accent," and me thinking, I just want to lose this thing. I don't want to be different. I already have all these other things about me that are different. I was desperate,
Absolutely. I was not interested in being different at all. I just wanted to fit in. I would literally, at the time, this is like in 1990. I came in 89. And around 1990, I believe, is when Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas came out. And that was a hit. And I didn't understand what a New York, sort of dialogue was. So I was like, okay, these guys, this is how Americans talk. So I watched that movie a lot. And at the time, I was also like, I didn't know it at the time, but I was really inspired by Robert De Niro too. I thought, man, this guy's really cool. This guy is just like familiar Iranian characteristics to him. And which I realized later, Italians and Iranians and just pretty much all immigrant cultures have these similarities. Sure. I didn't realize that at the time. I didn't really have the context. But so again, I would use anything I could to be able to learn how to talk like an American. But more than anything, after a while, I wanted to talk like my homies on the street, like the people from my neighborhood. So those are the ones who really I learned LA culture from.
I love this part. It's such a curious part of your journey that you end up going to Los Angeles, which certainly at that time, I mean, maybe now it's been displaced by Toronto or something, but it was certainly the epicenter of diaspora Iranians at the time. But you don't move into the Persian community area. You're not a Westwood kid. You guys go where there are very few Persians, and as you say, you're growing up with these Mexicans and Filipinos, and you take comfort among being with these other immigrants, and I think that's quite beautiful. And sometimes in the Persian community, as you will know, Iranians sometimes like to see themselves as different from other immigrants, or don't compare us to something or other. So the fact that you're this kid, you don't know all of that. You're feeling this commonality with a Mexican kid, with a Filipino kid who's going through probably some of the same things you are, trying to navigate being in America, trying to figure out how to speak with their accent or whatever, trying to figure out how to come to terms with their name is a little different from other people's or whatever. Can you speak to that, the identity that you felt with these other kids, despite the fact that one of them comes from Manila or Mexico City?
I mean, they accepted me. When I first came, and I remember walking around my neighborhood and sort of meeting people and stuff. And then everyone's like, why you talk like this? Where are you from? I was like, I'm from Iran, and I just came from London. They had never met anyone like me, but they knew that I wasn't born here, that I was similar to them because of that. So they treated me the same. They would poke fun at me about where I'm from and stuff like that. But I felt accepted by them. So I made fun of them back, and this is kind of how we were able to form a connection. They didn't try to bully me or pick on me. And I'll forever be grateful to the people in that neighborhood. And I'll always be grateful to Mexican and El Salvadorian and Filipino folks and Black folks for really taking me in. And they did.
I hear you. I really do. When you talked about arriving in your apartment and you're kind of like, what is this compared to the way you had been living in Iran? That's what you're experiencing as a kid. But you're also observing what your parents are experiencing. And your dad had been the executive vice president of Chase Manhattan Bank in Iran. Yeah. By the time your family is in the States, your parents are trying to make ends meet and build everything back from scratch. What was it like watching your dad go through that?
I as a kid, I was like, man, my dad is always freaking stressed. My dad's always pissed off. As an adult, again, we're talking about how we build empathy. Looking back on now, I know why the man, because he was a grown-ass man with pride, that he went from this to now he was literally pushing boxes in this warehouse. He had an MBA from Loyola University in Chicago that he came here in the 70s and got. Busted his ass, did everything he could. He was so young, shooting up. He was literally shooting up like a rocket in Iran. And came here to do that. But also looking back now is the people that I grew up with in my neighborhood never even had that opportunity that I had. They never even knew what it was like to live upper middle class. At least for the first 6 years of my life, I was living upper middle class. And I was meeting a lot of folks who had never had that privilege. So even then I had a certain type of privilege, because as a kid, I just knew that my family is going through a lot and they were very stressed. My mom had never had a job before in her life. Now she had to start working. They're only humans. There's only so much they can keep from their children. So there was always a lot of tension and stress when I was growing up in my household, especially in the beginning, the first several years we were here.
Your dad has become something of a role model for you, partly because, or I guess both your parents, but you've told me about your dad, partly because he built from scratch and then found success again after many years of determination, right?
Absolutely. It's not just because he's my dad. He truly, truly is an American success story. Literally, the company that he was pushing boxes in their warehouse. I don't know why I keep saying pushing boxes. Nobody pushes boxes in the warehouse, but you know what I mean? Like, he was doing inventory in a warehouse, and that's literally all he would do.
Right.
10 years later, he was the the CFO of that company for like 25 years, and then recently retired. And now, you know, he has nothing to worry about ever again financially. I mean, he put in the work and he made all the right decisions for him and my family financially. So like, I have a huge amount of admiration for that.
Yeah.
You know, that's the same type of lofty work ethic that I try to take with me in my industry.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean,
Yeah.
Look at what your dad did, and now look at what you're doing. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now look what I did, and I'm a disgrace. No, but no,
I'm kidding.
No, I'm totally no.
Yeah,
I
you know
get it.
I'm
No,
kidding.
It's kind of like, it's just so different, and it's like I again had the then sort of privilege of not having to start from the ground up because. You know, my parents kind of did that for me. That's why
I got my dad's name tattooed on my arm here. And the reason is exactly that, because they were pioneers that came here only with the intention of creating the conditions where we would have an opportunity. And that is, how can we, and that will never exist again. I mean, in terms of the world has changed so much that, you know, at the time when our parents came here, you know, your dad couldn't get on FaceTime with you know, the family back in Iran. Like, it was like you're cutting off, you know, your family, you're cutting everything off, and you're going to the new world in some like old school kind of way. I will always have respect for people like your dad and your parents.
Yeah, likewise, and for yours too, my brother. I can't even imagine what strength it took to do that. That nothing in life. I think very few things in life can be harder than something like that. You
said you didn't really hang out with a lot of Iranians until like the end of high school. Was there a reason for that?
I mean, the schools I was going to and the environment I was at, I just didn't meet a lot of them. Then when in like ninth grade, I met a couple of Iranian dudes, and what I liked was that they were American like me, but they were also Iranian. Like there was a shared cultural experience there, and that was cool. And then that's when I started to get to know more Iranians. But for the majority of my life growing up, and even now as an adult, I don't really have I don't have a ton of Iranian acquaintances, to be honest. Not because of my choice, it's just kind of how it is, I guess. Can I ask you about if this is something that's weird or sensitive, you don't have to answer or what, but no. I want to ask you about the Payam and Peter thing, because a lot of us struggle with whether we should change or anglicize our names when we come to the West. I mean, it's something I always felt conflicted by, since Jian was no party for white people to say back in the 80s and 90s when I was coming up. But I mean, how did you make that decision to start using Peter as well? You know, I that decision I made in like pretty much end of elementary. I was just really, really sick of having to keep pronouncing my name to teachers. Goes back to not wanting to stand out. You know, like roll first, you know, the substitute, let's say, comes and it's roll call. It's like, you know, John Smith and Ashley Johnson and Payam. I was just so sick of it. And it was. And they don't know what to expect. Are you a little girl? Are you a boy? What is a Payam? Yeah, exactly. And this is like the 90s, early 90s. People didn't give a shit. They weren't sensitive to like, oh, let me try to pronounce this name right. You know, like, like here, okay, whatever. You know, like they didn't give a damn. So I just didn't want to be different. When I first came in, I remember in some kids in elementary school, I tell them I'm from like France, and like just like I would just say any nonsense to make me not sound like I'm from this country called Iran, who their parents have seen on the news, you know, for a dozen negative reasons. Yeah, I was just sick of that. Has there ever been a time where you felt like you want to drop the Peter and go back to Payam, or you're really Peter now at this point? I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. You know, the thing is, I'm kind of both. You know, there is a group of people that just know me as a Peter, and then there's a group of people that know me as Payam. And at this point, it's kind of both my name. I'm sure that at some point I will drop the Peter once I get to a place in my career where I think that won't cause any like confusion or anything like that. I don't know. That's a great question. It's something that I kind of struggle with myself, because at the time it made sense. And now, I mean, because I never legally changed my name to that, you know, so it's kind of like, who is even Peter Banifaz?
And so, maybe for the first time in our lifetimes, I mean, I don't know if this is true, but it may not be, it could be an asset to have a more interesting name at this point, you know? I mean, right today, 2021, just in the last year or two, I feel like there's been such a shift, you know, around accepting diversity, or people, you know, or that who knows? I mean, maybe it certainly wouldn't be a liability, I would think, you know, but.
Absolutely not. I mean, like when I first got into the industry, my goal was, I did not want to come in like as an Iranian or Middle Eastern actor, because I knew that I would have like maybe a couple of opportunities a year, and that's to play a, you know, convenience store clerk or a terrorist, and I've played both. So, you know, that's the thing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to come in as this ethnically ambiguous guy. You have no clue where I'm from, which would be good because, you know, because I in general, casting often does look at me as ethnically ambiguous. They don't consider me the quintessential Middle Eastern looking character, to whatever that is in their mind.
But if they say we want you to play a Hispanic guy, are you okay with that, or do you like worry about appropriation?
No, I think I'm concerned with appropriation. I think we're way past that. I think that there are tons and tons of incredible Latino Hispanic actors, and that opportunity shouldn't be taken away from them. It should be given to them. Just because, you know, I'm a fairly light-skinned guy, you know, but just because I have darker features doesn't mean I should be able to play this character that appropriates an entire group of people who are readily available to work. So I wouldn't want someone to do that to me either. You know, I wouldn't someone to be cast as an Iranian who's not an Iranian. I would just find that at this stage where we are in our society, I think it's inappropriate and it's irresponsible.
Two words: Jake Gyllenhaal. You could have been the Prince of Persia. They gave it to Jake. Good guy. I'm not saying, you know, he's not a great actor, but I do hope that has changed at this point, because it's certainly time. I mean, there's been films that were made pretty recently, some of which even might have gotten an Oscar, with Iranians played by non-Iranians in it. So it's something we, I guess, still struggle with. It's interesting when you say ethnically ambiguous. So you intentionally, what does that mean? That means that I'm going to play someone that isn't white, but I don't need to explain what this person is.
I guess ethnic ambiguous is like, hey, whoever you bring me in for, I'll play. If you think I match that person, I'll play. I mean, this is especially when I was getting into the industry beginning. I would have done any role, you know. I didn't know any better. I was desperate, you know. I was hungry. I was desperate. It's just pretty much for me. Ethnically ambiguous was like anything you think I can pass for, I'm willing to pass for. Now, luckily, we're at a different place where it's like casting and it's, you know, networks and studios. They want to see those diverse characters. They want to see those diverse roles. Oh, not always for the right reasons, but hey, they want to see them.
I was going to ask you about Shameless in a few minutes, but I might as well ask you now. I mean, you've scored a wide variety of roles that, but becoming a regular on a series, Shameless, I think it was 3 seasons you did it, must have meant a lot to your career. It was also, the character was Farhad, and I remember when I first saw that, and I took some solace in that. I was like, oh, that's an Iranian name. That's Iranian. Was that partly your doing to make the character, or were you cast as, was the name of the character already Farhad? And B, tell me about how much that being in that series and being a regular in a big series was a game changer for your career.
So the character was named Farhad. Originally, the character was Arab. And when they booked me and they asked me, are you Arab? And do you speak Arabic? And I was like, no, I speak Farsi. And so they basically then changed the character to Iranian. Originally, the idea was that they were going to have this character that was fairly religious character, that like, or he fully embraced his Islamic religion, Islamic roots. But originally that character was not meant to be Iranian, but it became Iranian because they cast me.
Okay. And how big a deal was that for your career, being in Shameless?
Well, it was great. It was a fantastic show. John Wells, the executive producer. I mean, he's literally a living legend in the business, and he was very kind to me, very supportive. Working with him was incredible. You know, being on a Emmy award-winning, Emmy-nominated show on Showtime, all these things definitely really helped. And then just having an opportunity to be on 3 seasons of it, definitely it was a great stepping stone in the right direction for me.
How does it work, Peter? Is there a critical mass or something where you get to a point where, I don't know if casting directors or agents or something know you? I mean, you've literally done the circuit when it comes to very popular comedic TV show. You were in Veep, you were in Silicon Valley, you were in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, you were on Mom. Like, is that because you've just become familiar to the people who cast those kind of shows and they know to go to you? I mean, besides your talent, of course, I don't want to take anything away from your talent, but it's amazing that you've been on, you know, that you've done this virtual tour of all these shows. How do you see it happening?
Thank you, my brother. I was lucky to get representation when I was able to get representation, and because of that, I was able to, my agents send me out for good shows, and you know, when you go in, it's just like anything else, you develop a reputation, and just going to meeting with different casting directors and auditioning with different casting directors, you know, once they see your work and they become familiar with it, then next time they see your name comes across their desk, they'll be much more liable to bring you in. And so it's just kind of like going in there, being professional, doing good work, and then hopefully just sort of developing a reputation in the industry amongst casting. I think that's very important for any young actor coming up, is really you want casting in town to know you, and you want to have a good reputation with them. And by that means you come on time, you're prepared, you're polite, you're professional, you come in, do your work, bye-bye. And then the next step is building a reputation with showrunners and producers around town. And how you do that is same thing. On set, you show up, you're prepared, you're professional, polite, you do your work, go home. You know, and that's pretty much like with any industry.
You're still a pretty young guy. You're still, I think you're 39 now. What are you?
39, yeah.
39.
Yeah.
But I just want to take 3 steps back. And you did an MBA. And I know, I know family pressure had something to do with that. But you've long talked about the fact that you always knew you wanted to be a performer. You always knew you wanted to be an entertainer. You always were one in your family and amongst your friends. Why go through with having to get an MBA when that could retard those early years of getting into pilot season or getting casting directors to know you or becoming an actor and all that?
Obviously, first and foremost, there was pressure from my family, mainly from my dad. And it wasn't pressure, hey, go to business school. It was like, have yourself a plan B. Have yourself a plan B. In my mind, I couldn't afford to think of it as a plan B. And I still can't. I had to think of it. It's plan A, plan A1, A2, A3.
Plan A or bust. Plan A or bust. I'm going to go for it.
The only thing that's going to stop me is a bullet. I mean, I cannot think of it this way. But I had to also appease my dad, who was, often would support me. I was living in his house. I had respect for him. I understood that what he said rationally made sense. And all that together, so I was, okay, let me go to grad school. I decided to pursue business. I thought, okay, maybe I can at least use some of these business principles towards my career in the film industry. But during that time, I was still fully embedded in my acting training. I was still going to my acting class once a week. I was like, there's no way I'm going to take a break from this. If anything, this is first, the academics is second.
But in your bio, you joke about not using your MBA. I mean, does it ever come in handy?
It comes in handy, like, because I understand financing. It comes in handy, like when I, was getting a loan for my condo, or when I'm like, when I want to lease a car, or if a friend needs help with some finance stuff. But that's it. Career-wise, I also learned some management skills. You learn some management skills. I think some of those probably help me in terms of dealing with people when it's in business and when there's some type of potential conflict could arise or whatnot.
The reason I ask is because we're the next generation. I mean, there's generations who are younger than us, but the next generation, in other words, we're not our parents, who we always make the joke, doctor, engineer, and all that. And I want to know, I don't have kids yet, do you?
No, not yet.
So what would I say to a kid? Would I say, I mean, am I going to adopt what's been passed on through the generations of just get a plan B? The thing is, plan B, it doesn't mean educate yourself. It means a very specific thing. It's code for, maybe a handful of possible, ways you're supposed to go. In other words, I really still believe in a liberal arts education. Like, I would always, no matter you want to be a musician, you want to be in the media, you want to be an actor, whatever, still go to university, read great works of literature, learn critical thinking. I mean, those things are the tools, I believe, that everybody should have. But the idea of a plan B, meaning just become an engineer first, or get your medical degree, or get the MBA, I wonder about that. So, I mean, if your son wants to become a comedian or an actor or a comedic actor, would you say just get an MBA first?
No way. What I would say is, show me you love this. Show me the work. Show me the passion. I'll support anything you do. You want to be a stand-up comedian? Show me. I want to see you at nights doing, 2 a.m. doing like open mics. I want to see you writing constantly. I want to see you constantly watching other comedians taking notes. Show me that you're passionate about this. I'll support whatever you do. I'll financially support you. I'll support you with my time, my heart, everything. And that's really what happened with my family at the end. It's like, they were like, no. And they're like, I got to a point where they couldn't deny it anymore. Mm-hmm. It got undeniable to them. And, and that's what it is. But if my kids were like, hey, I want to be an actor too, I was like, you're not going to do it off me. It has to be off you.
Right.
Show me the work, show me the passion, and I'll support whatever you do.
What a fantastic answer. Let's end off where we started with these videos you've been making during COVID. These things are getting thousands of views in a day. Are you surprised by how these funny videos you've done about a son and a Persian dad have taken off on Instagram?
I definitely am surprised. I think anybody when something kind of like gets even mildly popular, I think anybody's lying who says like, I knew this would happen. You never know what audience is like. All I wanted to do was put something that I thought was funny so that other people could also see. It's like, hey, this guy is a culturally diverse actor who's doing something different and funny. Let me watch. And I told you, like, I had never done an Iranian character before, really. I had never tried to like blend my comedic ability with like my culture. This was really the first time, and the love people have given me has been just really humbling.
Well, full circle, brother. From the little kid in the bunker in Tehran to a guy who's reaching out to his people, the community around the world, who are finding resonance in these accessible and funny videos.
Thank you, brother. I really
Nicely
appreciate
done.
you saying that. Thank you, brother.
I have very much enjoyed this, and I hope we can do it again in person in a post-COVID moment, because
absolutely,
I really look forward to that, and I'm looking forward to all of what you're going to do creatively on TV and film and online in the coming years. And thanks for making the time today.
Oh, thank you, my brother. Thank you so much. That's a I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Khudafis.
Khudafis.
That's Peter Payam Banifaz, an actor, a comedian who can be seen on various TV shows and films, and a very popular Instagram channel exploring and satirizing Persian family culture. Peter Banifaz joined us from Los Angeles today. All right. Captain Reza, Groovy Shaya, Fabulous Keon, microphone's back on. Well, you guys could tell I enjoyed that. I totally related to so much of what we were talking about. What a What an interesting guy. What a great conversation. So much more than just a comedic actor
Yeah, that was a
or
surprise.
Instagram star. He's got such perspective and such an interesting insight into the life of a first-generation immigrant, and so balanced too. When he was talking about his parents understanding, where he's at this point, what it's meant to be an actor, they've come to terms with it, all of that. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Keon?
I was a fan from the beginning since I discovered Peter, and I have to say his comedic skits got me through this pandemic, honestly.
Oh, wow.
Like, he brought so much laughter into my life. For anyone that hasn't checked out his videos, he is absolutely hilarious.
Peter Banifaz is your vaccine.
He is my vaccine for, joy and all that. But this interview
This is going to be the first guest we've had on that likes Keon after the show. That feels like Keon likes them for the first time.
But anyway, I wanted to say his story surprised me. He's a comedian and actor, so I was not expecting such a deep emotional journey of it made me realize everybody has a story behind that, comedian or actor or whatever. There's this story, this
Don't
journey.
Don't judge people by their funny Instagram video.
Exactly.
Keon.
Yeah. The whole immigrant story of how
maybe you should stop judging Reza now as well.
Maybe, just maybe. Yeah, but the whole immigrant story was beautiful. How when he first arrived in the U.S., it was the minorities, the kids from different.
That's something that I loved him for saying, because it was so much my experience, and so few people have come on the show and talked about that the solace that we find, not just in being in a Persian community, because there was no Persian community when we first came here, for me, but other immigrants who are going through the same thing, and so I just thought that was a beautiful insight when he talks about the Koreans and Filipinos and El Salvadorians, and he's in that community, and because you go, he moved to LA, so he was with the Persians, but he wasn't. It's very nice. Yes, Captain Reza. Yes.
I love him. He's a funny guy. He's very talented, and kudos to him, man, for putting the work in and getting through all those horrible auditions because I know how it is. I've had that experience being an actor, being in the game, and it takes a toll on you, man. I quit. I did quit acting for a very, very long time because of that reason. That either they wanted me to be a convenience clerk or cab driver number 5, and I couldn't take it anymore.
Do you regret that? I mean,
no, not one bit, because it worked out for me in a different way. I chose a different aspect of the business, and it worked out. But and I do that, and I do act now selectively. But I wish I had the courage that he does and the perseverance to stuck it out. And now he's on a big show, Shameless, and he's got a bright future ahead of him.
Yeah,
I'm very proud of him. Very proud of him.
Shaya, you want to say anything before we get to It's All Persian to Us?
Just one quick thing. Actually, it made me think that we usually speak about revolution as a reason that the immigration happened. A lot of immigration happened, but war. I mean, we forget about war.
That's true.
I think we have to talk more about war. I was 3 years old when war ended, so I don't have any vivid memory, but I have it in my subconscious. I have the PTSD of war in.
Yes.
And so it's
yes, for most countries and people, citizens of that country or people of that descent, an 8-year war would be enough. An 8-year war that cost 1 million lives would be enough. The fact that this dovetails with a revolution and a change in culture, and it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a very good point you make, Shaya. Thank you for that. A much better point than what Reza said.
He's in a good mood today.
He's got a spring in his step ever since he started reading that book about people dying.
Oh my God, Shaya!
I read a book about the world ending, and so when I saw the world is ending, I was happy because I am not yet ending.
Oh man!
I read a book about a man who was eaten by alligator.
Grandpa Shaya.
But because I was not eat.
Man, you better sit down before you fall down.
Shaya, I think you need to drink more water.
Oh, okay. All right.
Come on.
I read a book about someone in hurricane.
Hurricane.
Hey, it's Thursday.
Yes.
You know what
it
that means?
No idea. Please tell us.
She's a dear friend, a diaspora blend, a gym workout cat, a bicultural brat, but lovable, smart, funny, and on a journey to discover what we actually discovered. Here we go, Bacho. I'm already anticipating the via. So I don't want to throw to it. I don't want to throw to it. Reza, please.
What will it take for you not to do it?
It's all Persian to us with Kian Nademi.
Via.
All right, Kian, what do you have for us today in the It's All Persian to Us basket?
Well, we're now well into the second year of a global pandemic. Lockdowns, masks, and Netflix has been the theme of what feels like eternity at this point.
Yes.
It's also a time of great appreciation for the field of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
We've come to realize just how important the medical advancements are in our society. Well, the rapid development of a vaccine, for example, is something that will be forever written down as one of the biggest achievements during this time.
We invented the vaccine.
Well, no.
Can't claim that one. Pfizer is Persian. No.
Yes,
not quite yet.
Firuz.
Well, this is also a time when doctors, nurses, scientists, and really all medical professionals will forever be remembered as the heroes of COVID-19.
Yes.
Well, in that case, we should be bowing down to the man responsible for the greatest medical contribution of all time, the man responsible for the very first canon of medicine.
Oh.
His name was Ibn Sina, or otherwise known as Avicenna in the Western world.
Canon of medicine?
Yes, it's an encyclopedia of medical, like all medical knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah, so this man revolutionized the field of medicine and forever changed the trajectory of the world. Without him, Europe would probably still be in the Dark Ages. Well, just kidding, kind of.
Avicenna.
Not really. Yes, Avicenna, that's his name. Avicenna.
Yeah. Did you know this man, Shaya? Did you learn this in grade school?
Yeah, of course, Ibn Sina.
Ed Messina?
Ibn Sina. But in the West, he's known as Avicenna. That was kind of like his Latin name.
But in Iran, he's known as
Ibn Sina.
Ebenezer. Ebenezer Sina. Ibn Sina.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Avicenna.
So like I mentioned.
Did you know him, Reza?
Yeah, of course. We studied it at elementary school.
Okay.
Yeah. So the canon of medicine, like I said, was the first encyclopedia of all medical, information, compiled into 5 textbooks with an overview of all the knowledge that was gathered over time. And this was, including all of Indian medicine and Greek medicine, Persian medicine. So he compiled everything into 5 basically encyclopedia books of medicine.
Like a canon of medicine.
Exactly, like a canon of medicine, Jian, yes.
Yeah.
So these are known as the most famous books in the history of medicine, which were completed in the year 1025. So this basically set the standard for all of medicine and remained a medical authority around the world for centuries. So it's even referenced in medical schools today, actually. And what else can I say? Yes, so...
Actually, canon is the name of book in Persian also is Qanun.
Qanun.
So
that's where that word comes
Qanun
from.
Is not
Qanun, canon.
Rule?
Yeah.
Qanun, yeah.
Yeah,
Rule.
canon.
But canon doesn't mean rule.
Yeah, but I know, but probably the one who wants to translate it, he probably سلیقه به خرج داده.
Maybe it's a different canon. How is it spelled?
Well, canon means like when you're talking about a bunch of materials related to a subject, you'd say like the canon of sports authority can be found in these encyclopedias, or you could say the canon of Farid Zalan's music. But but I don't think it means rules. But
but the title of the book
but
is
Qanun and canon sound similar.
Yes,
So
Yeah, I guess that's where it must be where it came from, right? So this text was produced during a time that was known as the Islamic Golden Age of Discovery, which ranged from the 8th century to the 13th century. But listen, if it were up to me, it should be called the Persian Golden Age of Discovery, because, well, the majority of the discoveries were made by Persian scholars. Avicenna, Razi, Khwarazmi, Farabi, Hayyan, just to name a few of the very, very long list of this. You know this, Shaya, of course.
But were they not Muslims?
Yes, they were, but the thing is, they were all Persian. Like, majority of them were Persian, so it just kind of, I don't know, this is a personal thing for me. It kind of irritates me that it's not
Even
known
if they
as
were
the
Muslims.
fine, but at the same time, this was a time that the Arabs ruled over Persia, so a lot of what was, going on was they were kind of trying to eliminate the culture.
Differentiate that these are Persians.
Right, yeah. But that's
one
my
of
own-
the other reasons that the book written in Arabic, it's
But
not
that's
in-
because they enforced that, So it's controversial.
that
I
was
know.
the language of the science at that time, the Arab.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, moving on. So I digress.
No, it wasn't, Shaya.
No, it wasn't Shaya.
So this.
I don't know.
Anyway, this was a time when
You're
mass.
upsetting Keon about things that
We'll take
happened
it outside
1,000
later.
years ago.
But actual things that happen and are true.
This is good for Clubhouse tomorrow. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this was a time when massive discoveries were being made in the fields of science, math, astronomy, economics, culture, and of course, medicine. So I'm talking about medical advancements that were way ahead of their time, and these were all made accessible by the work of Ibn Sina or Avicenna. So he took a holistic view of medicine where physical and psychological factors, as well as drugs and diet, were all combined in treating patients. This was, they weren't doing that at that time. They were basically, I suppose, doing trial and error, like, oh, let's try this and see what happens, and patient dies.
Right.
So basically he was compiling, books
Qanuns.
of like qanuns. Yeah,
Qanuns.
precisely. Yeah, so this is when medicine started to be treated as a true science with emphasis on empirical evidence and repeatable procedures. So essentially, he created a body of knowledge that was massively important, making the canon of medicine a medical Bible for centuries to come. And so, in a world when health is wealth, I raise my glass to Avicenna, the great Persian scholar, a true pioneer in the field of medicine who single-handedly saved thousands, if not millions, of lives around the world through the first canon of medicine. My friends, it's all Persian to us.
Nicely done.
Did you know about this, Jian?
I did not know
You
about that.
didn't?
I did not. I neither know Avicenna or Ebenezer's.
You didn't know Avicenna?
I don't know.
Really?
I mean, I know.
You've heard of him.
I know the name. In fact, the name came up recently. But no, I did not. This sounds vaguely familiar, but it's hard for me to distinguish all the things that we claim that we. So this one I do understand is legitimate, but no, I can't.
You're saying the other ones are not legitimate?
There are some that I know are not. Yes,
I
we
have
invented the Toyota. That's not.
I didn't say that.
I have a question for Shaya, actually. Ibn Sina means son of Sina. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
It's funny to me because that, like, in English, they changed that to Avicenna.
To make it more
his name
pronounceable.
wasn't Ibn. Ibn Sina means the son of
Oh, his name was
Sina.
Sina.
Well,
So-
his father's name was
Yeah.
Sina,
Oh.
and then he
Yeah.
referred to him.
I don't know
as
how naming
son
worked
of
back then.
Sina.
They were all, Razi has like a longer name, Ibn, name than I'm
But that's
What's
the
your
thing.
dad's name?
It's Khosrow.
Well,
You're
you would
you're
have been-
Ibn Khosrow.
No, she
No,
would
I'm
be
not
Bent
his son.
Khosrow. Bent
Bent.
means
Bente
daughter.
Khosrow?
Bente
Yeah,
Khosrow,
Bint
yeah.
his daughter.
I've always thought she was a bit Bente Khosrow.
You know what? Ibn, I don't know who.
Ibn Farhang.
Oh, your dad's name is Farhan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be Ibn Farhang.
Yeah.
Bente Khosrow. That's definitely my new name for you.
Oh, try that and see what happens.
What do you think of Keon? Well, she's a little bit Bente Khosrow, to be honest.
She's a bit bent in the head, isn't she?
All right. Well, that very interesting. Thank you, Keon, and the canon of medicine.
Yeah.
It added to the list of things that were legitimately. You see, there's a lot of debates about these things, but when Keon certifies these things as this is certified
This is the
Keon,
authority.
with the Persians have discovered these things.
Stamp of Keon approval.
Exactly.
It's
Thank you to the fabulous Keon. Thank you, Groovy Shaya. Thank you, Captain Reza, the on-air Roqe team. This is full time for Roqe for today. Listen, if you're a fan of this show, and let's face it, if you've made it this far into this episode, you're a fan of the show, go to our website, roqemedia.com, and if you're not already a patron, try and keep us alive with a $5 or $10 contribution. It's really not that big a deal, $5 a month, but it really helps us out. So roqemedia.com, support us is the button, and it's very simple. Just put your information in there and become a patron. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together, producer Susan, Ponce the artist, Thoughtful Degin, the fabulous Keon Savvy, Roham, Alhai Mertad, Master Muhammad, Captain Reza, and Groovy Shaya. Thank you to all of you out there supporting us and sharing our content. Find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. Mizun Bashi.